Okay. Well, good morning. I'll say one more time. Thanks everyone for joining this morning. My name's Samantha Pierce. I'm the Vice President of Sustainability here at New York State Homes and Community Renewal. And this morning, we will be giving you an overview of our Solar Opportunity Screening Program, referred to as SOS. Go to the next slide. During this morning's webinar, we'll review both the introduction of who we are, our program overview of the Solar Opportunity Screening Tool, which we're excited to be launching and showing and demonstrating today. We'll provide a Solar Opportunity Screening Tool overview with a demo of how the tool will work. And we will discuss the process for those electing to proceed with solar thereafter, and then provide an overview of our solar TA services that will be a part of our Solar Opportunity Screening Program here at New York State HCR. I'm joined and supported today by my colleague Sunitha Sarvaswaran, who is our Director of Decarbonization Programs at New York State Homes and Community Renewal. We're also supported by our consultants, housing sustainability advisors, of which Leah is on today, and our technical consultant, Solar One, who will be providing our walkthrough of our solar tool. If folks have any questions during the presentation, you'll note that you are all muted as attendees, so please do feel free to use the chat feature during the presentation if you have a question that you fear you may not remember. When we get to the end of the presentation, we will have time for Q&A, at which point we will allow folks to raise their hand and come off of mute. So if you want to submit questions during the presentation, please do so as a chat. If you want to save those questions and ask them verbally, please wait until the end of the presentation when we will open a Q&A session. So let's go ahead and get started and jump into our presentation. Okay, great. So why are we doing a solar program here at HCR as the state's affordable housing agency? As folks may be aware, we've spent quite a deal of time over the last 4 years building out our sustainability programs and our offerings to our affordable housing development community on the multifamily side of things. And so what we found through some of our existing initiatives, like our Clean Energy Initiative program, is that solar is really a great partner with those other services that we're providing. And there's a real opportunity to reduce our energy costs and save on monthly electric bills when we pair the work that we are really hoping to steer the market towards in terms of high efficiency electric buildings, when we also then add in solar panels, directly reducing the cost of the electric for the property. There's also an increased sense of property value because of that deep reduction of operational cost savings that the solar panels provide as an asset to the building. And it provides a direct source of energy for the property to really help with resiliency and sort of continuation of service. And of course, there's a deep alignment here with climate benefits, further reinforcing our ability to do all electric high performance buildings by reducing those costs when we add solar, really reducing our carbon emissions and dependency on the grid. And it really aligns with our broader state goals under our Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act of 2019, where we're really looking to create clean energy sources of energy, as well as reducing our buildings' carbon emissions. And we're really focused on this here at the Housing Agency because, according to the work of our Climate Action Council, and just a reminder and grounding source for folks, our buildings do contribute in New York State as the largest emitters of carbon emissions, of which 66% or so of those emissions come from space heating. And so when we're able to really pair these high performance all electric heating systems with now solar, we think that's a really great win-win situation for our development community. So lots of eco-beneficial outcomes when we start to introduce solar into these projects. Next slide. So, what are we envisioning here in terms of what the solar opportunity screening program will look like and how will it function? Um, the solar opportunity screening pool itself will be required for any developer that's submitting a project to us for either our 4% or 9% deals that they complete the tool. We'll review this tool during this presentation, but it is not required that that developers install the solar, especially if it is not cost effective. The Solar Opportunity Screening Program is specifically for evaluating if solar would be beneficial for the property and make financial sense. And that is what the program is specifically focused on, is determining if solar makes sense at your particular property. We're really hoping that through the requirement of this tool, we will help to educate all of the developers and the network of technical support providers, either architects or energy managers in this space, to understand how to evaluate solar in a real way from a financial beneficial perspective, as well as from a design consideration perspective. We're really excited to provide technical assistance as part of that to help deliver on that educational goal and really to get to the development community determining and assessing the viability of solar earlier on in the development process. We'll get into the timeline in just a second. And so really making sure that that's part of the consideration process from an early stage in our development pipeline progress at the agency. And so what exactly is this SOS tool? It is a Excel spreadsheet that will be provided in all of our application material going forward that would be submitted with HCR's regular financial application for either our 4%, 9%, or subsidy only projects. And so really built into the tools and the application that most of you are already familiar with. And we're really excited that we are utilizing the project to really determine that viability at some of your first and early TA sessions with us as an agency, the processes that sort of already exist within those funding mechanisms. So we're really excited that overall this tool will be a requirement, but that it's built into the existing processes that you all may or will become familiar with as part of applying to HCR for funding and finance for your multifamily buildings. Next slide. So in our existing guideline opportunity, in our existing sustainability guidelines, we do have a requirement currently in the published and posted sustainability guidelines that requires New York City projects to assess their solar feasibility. We are working on updates to our guidelines, of which the proposed language that will be in our newly published guidelines in the early spring will require, as I alluded to, that all projects complete this SOS tool and submit it in line with their financing application to our agencies. So again, just to reiterate here, just as the SOS tool will be required for any of our projects receiving financing from our 4%, 9%, or subsidy-only pathways, any project that is complying with or required to comply with our sustainability and design guidelines, that's where this requirement would be listed in the updated guidelines going forward. So next slide. So what does this look like for timeline? Because I know that's always a question. We do understand that we have two different pipelines in our agency for finance development. And so we've rolled out what we think here is a clear timeline for folks as you're thinking about projects that you might have in your pipeline or that you're working on developing shortly. So we're sort of here right at this springtime with our first item getting checked off here, our solar screening tool launch. And sort of hereafter making the tool available for review on our website and making additional technical resources in terms of how to use the tool and best practices available on our website for folks to review shortly after this webinar and presentation. Between the spring and the summer, We will ensure that our guidelines are updated, as I mentioned, which will enforce the requirement. And that any project that's closing in 2025 should really start to look at the tool, although the requirement for having to submit will not be in place until formally when we release our next 9 competitive application, which will be late summer into early fall. Any project looking to put in an application under that next competitive funding round would be required to complete this solar opportunity screening tool at that time. So we do encourage between now, early spring, and mid to late summer that the community get familiarized with the tool itself so that you're ready to complete it during that application phase when that next competitive RFP comes out. And then, as we mentioned, projects in 2026, either on our 4% side or 9% side, any project looking to close in 2026 and beyond would be required to comply and submit the tool. So hopefully that's clear for folks. And now we can go to the next slide. Thanks, Leah. So what does the process look like if you're actually putting together a deal and you're thinking about how to work through, how do I incorporate this new tool requirement? What we're really looking for here is that the SOS tool gets submitted to HCR during the TA session. So when you were having your regular initial TA session and the material of both the application and the early schematic or design development construction documents that you have prepared, you would submit this tool in line with that. As I mentioned, the tool will be baked into the application itself, so that should hopefully be pretty easy to comply with. We will then review that tool in advance of your TA session so that we can be prepared to provide feedback. We'll get into some of the technical detail on that in the presentation, and then be able to present those details to you at the TA session with either questions or sort of a recommendation of how to proceed based on the review of that tool, and then have a dialogue with your team. So we do encourage that during those TA sessions, you have folks, that are able to speak to the mechanical design assumptions. Oh, and sorry, I see a question in the chat that I'm just going to respond to because it's a great question. I'm mentioning the 4% and 9% programs as well as them being listed on the slide here. These are our 2 multifamily financing programs, the 4% bond program and the 9% low-income housing tax credit. Those are the processes in which we finance as a state agency our affordable housing projects. And so any team looking to apply for or receive those funds, as well as subsidy-only projects, would need to comply with this new process and use the tool itself. And then skipping back to the timeline, sorry for that interlude there. Once the TA session is complete and the program application is finalized, the SOS tool should be included in that final application that's submitted back as a completed package to your underwriting or AVP team. Next slide. Okay, so what we really want to ensure here is that the SOS tool itself has 2 outputs. It will tell you solar is viable for your site based on early schematic estimates, as well as or no, solar is not viable for your site based on the financial and physical assumptions of the property. If the tool basically says no, your solar is not viable for your site, there's no additional action that you as the consultant or development team need to take. You just merely have to submit the tool as part of the application material that I just reviewed. If the tool says yes, the project is viable to pursue solar from a financial and physical perspective, then you have 2 options as the development team. If you choose not to pursue solar for whatever reason, then you do not need to take any action and you do not need to include it if you do not at this time. If you do choose as the developer that, oh, this is actually a great idea and will lower my operating costs as the tool is explaining, and perhaps there will be little or no out-of-pocket expenses in order to install the solar panels, then we will work with your team and provide some technical support to include that solar project in your underwriting as a whole project. So again, the tool is the requirement, but the installation of the solar system is not being required here. It is up to the developer if they choose to install, if the project is in fact presented as viable for solar panel installation. So that is the sort of overview of the program outline itself. We're going to switch to sort of unveiling what this tool actually looks like. So we can go to the next slide, and I will hand it off to Gio from Solar One to walk us through the tool itself. And so Gio, over to you.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. My name is Giovanni Caldero, Program Manager at Solar One. Solar One is a nonprofit organization based in New York City, and we mainly provide solar technical assistance for affordable housing. We have been developing this tool along with HCR and HSA for the past couple of months. One of the first things that I want to mention here is that you are not required to have any solar expertise, and HCR will be working alongside a solar TA provider. And that was in the presentation. You will see TAP. TAP it stands for Technical Assistant or Solar Technical Assistant Provider. So as Samantha was saying, the solar technical provider will consider a couple of things in order to determine whether or not if a building or a project is feasible for solar or not. One of the main things are listed here: array location, where the solar panels are going to be located, in the roof, in the ground, in the parking lot. Mounting method, they are different. Structure, or depending on your roof type, the age of the roof or the height of your roof, it might be that you need a canopy versus a ballasted system. So there are different methods, as well as the interconnection type. That's how the solar system will interact with the utility. There are many ways of doing it. Among the most common ones is one called net energy metering, or the other one is called community distributed generation. Next, we look into the condition of the roof. Based on the scope of work of your project, we will determine if solar will be feasible or viable for that project or not. Typically, if the building is getting roof replacement or roof resurface, then solar will be ideal for that, because we can coordinate the solar work along with the roof scope of work, and solar can be integrated with that. If the building has an old building, then solar will not be ideal for that. So that's why we are asking for the condition of the roof. The other consideration will be the energy uses, how much energy the building is using, and the annual electricity paid. With that, the tool will be able to determine how much savings will be offset by solar in terms of energy, and also in terms of money, how much you paid, and then how much solar savings you have. And the last and one of the most important considerations is the incentive. Incentives are very specific for your project, for your location. So the solar technical assistant provider will discuss this more in detail, but there are certain incentives that projects can take, and that will reduce the cost of solar. At this stage of this solar opportunity screening, we are determining that solar is viable if the system is larger than 4 kilowatts DC, and if the payback period is 15 years or less, equal or less than 15 years. Next slide. This is an illustration of all the different tabs of the workbook. Basically, this is going to be an Excel document, and these are the tabs. The first tab will be the instruction and assumptions. It's just for your reference. In this case, you don't want to, or you are not going to edit any of this. You don't need to input anything. It's just for your reference. If you need to clarify any where the assumptions coming from, you refer to that. Project information, you're going to include project details and contact information. The building information, if you have one building or multiple buildings, you're going to add details about your buildings or building incentive that might be applicable, electricity information. And again, if you don't have that information, further TA will be provided to you. So you fill this as at the best of your ability with information that you have at the moment. There is an optional advanced inputs tab that you don't need to fill out, but it's optional because sometimes projects are working directly with solar contractors and you may have a bid from contractors already and you have like a specific item that you want to consider into the tool, so you can add that into your inputs, but it's not required at this time. The other important tab is the site layout. When the solar TA provider is reviewing, they need to see your roof, how it looks like, what's the space available, and this tab allows for that. And lastly, once you populate all of the information, if you have completed to the best of your ability, the results tab will populate and you will see system size, price, and payback period. And now I will go over each individual tab and then I will do a quick demonstration. Here you have the first introduction and assumptions tab. And as I mentioned before, this is just for your reference. If you need more information about how the assumptions were selected or where the numbers are coming from, you can read through this tab and you can see where the numbers come from. For example, for how we get the pricing based on building height, mounting method, landmark status, and so on. So if this is just for your reference, in this input tab, in this tab, you don't need to modify or add anything. The most important thing about this tool is that you must complete to the best of your ability all the light blue cells. And you are going to see later what I mean by that. But if you complete all the light blue cells, then you will successfully complete the tool. Next slide. The project information tab will include 4 sections: project details. In the project details, you are going to include the HCR, project name, the ID, the program, and the address. With that, you are also going to select the construction type, if this is like a new construction, if this is a mod rehab, sub rehab, how many buildings are in the project, and how many of them are proposing solar. Let's say that you have 10 buildings, and let's say that you are going to do a renovation in your building, and 2 of those buildings already have solar. So then out of the 10 that are included in the project, then only 8 are proposing solar because you already have 2 in that example that already have solar. Then you are going to add information about about the applicant, your contact information, your name, your email, your company, as well as the owner or developer contact information, name, email of that person. If you are the owner and the applicant as well, feel free to repeat and include your information in that section in order to fill out all the blue cells. The next session will be the HCR information, HCR project manager, their contact information, their email, and if available at that time, you should include the information of your HCR underwriter, but the underwriting process will be a little bit more later. But if you have that information, feel free to include it at the beginning of your process. Also important, this informational project info tab will have applicant comments, so you can include comments about, hey, this building is including electrification, so the space is constrained because we are going to add new equipment into the roof, or this building or this roof will be a green roof, solar will not be will not have sufficient space because we plan to do another usage for the roof, or any other relevant information that you have, including questions. If you want to clarify something, then when the TA provider receive your application, they are going to see that you have questions, and then they are going to meet to discuss in detail. Um, in this tab also, there's a button that you are going to find at the bottom to include information about one building, single building, or multiple buildings. So depending on which, or the size of your project, how many buildings you have, you're going to fill out the information. Let's go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, there are going to be two different tabs depending if you have one building or multiple buildings, but the information will be the same. The main difference is that, as the note in the right side of the slide says, that if you complete the multiple buildings tab, you will add information about multiple buildings. The results tab at the end will not be populated because further technical assistance will be required. So you will meet with your TA provider and discuss, and they are going to check the viability of your multiple buildings. It might be the case that with the same example of 10 buildings, it might be the case that 5 buildings are going solar, 5 buildings are not going solar. So a little bit further investigation and further evaluations are required with multiple buildings. So that's why if you select that multiple buildings tab, at the end you will not have the results tab populated. But regardless, if you have a single building or multiple buildings, you need to file or fill out all of this information. Uh, for building details, you will need to identify the ownership. If this is like limited partnership, non-profit ownership, for-profit ownership, or rentals. Building height is important to determine. Roof access, for example, um, the usable area in square footage for solar. So if you have a lot space, that will impact the size of your solar system. If you have less space, that also will impact the size of your solar system. The roof condition, as I alluded before, if this is a brand new roof, if this roof is getting resurfaced, replaced, what's the condition of the roof work? And also, if the building or the project is proposing electrification, this will impact the energy consumption of the building, and with solar, that will have a significant impact as well with the solar installation. The other section here, as I said, you don't need to have deep expertise on this. There are several incentives that might be applicable to your building or to your project, and this will be reviewed later in the process. But if you have uh, information of the incentives that are applicable to you, feel free to select. In this case, there's a list of the federal ITC, the low income housing tax credit, the landmark or historic districts, census tracts, federal housing programs, etc. So if you know the incentive that applies to your building, feel free to select them. But you will receive more information and determine which incentives you can use later in the process. And the last part of this section is the owner paid electricity information. There is a section for utility. We listed the main utilities in the state of New York, so feel free to use that drop down to select your utility. The annual electricity usage, we need that information also to see how much energy the solar energy will be offsetting for your building. The same with the owner electricity cost in a year. So solar can be determined in savings in terms of like energy and also economic benefits. The last two, one is for determining if this building are master meter or not. In this case, master meter means is if the building have 1 meter for the entire building, or if each unit have their separate meter. So you select yes or no based on your building. And the last one is if the building has an elevator or not. This help us determine the electricity tariff in your utility, and that will create a more accurate assumption when we review your information for the solar feasibility. In addition, after this webinar, we are going to send an informational two-pager incentive two-pager. So for your reference, you can read a little bit more later after this webinar. Next slide. This is the site layout section. The main important thing is, as you can see in the screenshot on the left, is that you are going to see a white space. That space is designated for an image of your roof. In this case, I included roof plan. If you don't have roof plan available, you can go to Google Earth or Google Maps and take a screenshot. We just want to see or review what's the space, how it looks like, if there are any obstructions, if they are cell towers, antennas, if they have any other skylights or any other considerations or obstruction pipes, etc. So we are trying to see as much as we can in order to assess the solar available space for solar. In this section also, you have a comment section, and in this case, you are going to be adding information about any particular thing that you want the TA provider to know. In this case, it can be, hey, building is proposing electrification and the roof will be used to install new mechanical equipment. So the space is going to be a little bit reduced. Or if you plan to have recreational purposes in the roof, you're going to have different options or different usage in that roof. You note that in your comment sections, or any design features, space, and also if you are going to add any additional documentation like roof plans, utility bills, feel free to mention that here so the TA provider can see, hey, they are mentioning that there is a roof plan, so they go and refer to the actual roof plans in the attached separate documentation. Next slide. Here you can see the results tabs, and this is how it looks at completed analysis for a single building. As I said before, multiple buildings, you will not see this completed analysis. But in this case, we are going to see or highlight the four main different sections marked with stars. In this case, on the top left, we are going to see the system size, how big is your solar system, the price per watt, how much the system or the tool is estimating that price to be, and the cost of that system. Basically, if you take the price per watt and you multiply that by the system size, you will have a total estimated cost for that solar, and the solar production as well, and as well as the electricity savings. Later on in the next section, you are going to see the New York Sun incentive. So we are going to subtract that from the total cost, and that will give you an estimated upfront cost of the solar system. As I mentioned before, the applicable incentive, this will vary project by project, but in this section, you're going to see like a summary of the applicable incentives for your project. And you're going to see how many or how much incentives in terms of benefits you will have. And then on the top right section, you're going to review the main takeaways. In this case, you have a payback period, internal rate of return, lifetime net savings, and the small graphic with the cumulative cash flow. In this case, once again, to reiterate, once we review the results tabs, at this moment, solar is viable if the system is higher than 4 kilowatt DC and if the payback period is less or equal than 15 years. Next slide. This is also demonstrating how a multiple building results tab will look like. As I mentioned, if you add information about multiple buildings, it will likely not populate the result tabs because it will require a little bit more evaluation from the solar TA provider. So if you see something like this and you have multiple buildings, that's fine. You are going to submit your completed analysis, and further TA will be provided to you. Another important thing, regardless if this is a multiple building or a single building, if you see incomplete submission or incomplete documentation, you will see in the section that I highlighted that star, there's like a warning sign that says that you might have something incomplete. If you have that warning sign on the bottom of your result tabs, that means that some of the information that you input in your previous tab, like the project information tab or the building tab, something is missing or something is incorrect. So you can go back and check your inputs, and then you should be able to fix that problem. All right, next slide. Now I'm going to show you a little bit how the tool plays out. I'm going to share my screen really quick.
Thanks, Gio. And I want to do a time check. We have about 20 minutes left, and we want to make sure we have about 10 minutes for Q&A.
Absolutely, no problem. Thank you so much. Here, here we have the project information tab. This is how the tool looks like. As I said before, it's like an Excel. And this is to highlight that you must fill out the blue cell. So all of this must be filled out by you when you're completing your application. Project name per HPD, HCR, HCR ID, HCR program. One thing to note too is that some of these cells will have drop downs. So if you see here, there are 9%, 4%, and so on. So you choose the one that applies to your project. In this case, I'm just doing this as an example, but some of these cells will have a drop down. Project located in New York City, yes or no. The construction type as well. We have a drop down, new construction, mod rehab, and so on. You select the one that applies to your project. The same with the application status, number of buildings in the project, number of building going solar, applicant information. There will be your information. If you're submitting today, for example, you're going to put 3/14/2025, your name, your company, your email, and if different from if you have another developer and you're filling out on their behalf, you put their developer name, developer email, and the information from HCR if available. HCR program manager name, their email, and if you have or know the underwriter, please include that information here. If not, I'm pretty sure that the underwriter will be known later in the process. As I said in the presentation, this comment section is for you to explain or give more details about your project, any particular details that the person reviewing must know. Single building tab. One important thing here is that you can see in these cells that there is like a red triangle in the corner. This triangle is for you to hop up, and you're going to see like a comment. If you want more information and you are not sure what that means, there is a comment that you can see when you put your cursor into that cell, and then you're going to have or read more information that can help you fill out that particular cell. More information, ownership type. As I mentioned, is this a for-profit, non-profit? There is a drop down here, so you can select the one that applies to you. The estimated completion year, prevailing wage, number of dwellings, the building height. As I said before, these affect solar access, and different installation types are required based on the height of that building, the square footage of the area, so that will help us determine how big is your solar system. The condition of the solar location, is this like a parking lot, ground mount, if it's going to be in a roof, is a tilted roof versus a flat roof, and so on. So you fill this out to the best of your ability. And again, as I mentioned before, if you know the incentive, please select the ones that applies to you. And as I said, also they will review a little bit more later on in the process. And in this case, in the electricity information, you will select the utility that applies to your location. And you're going to give an estimate of like your usage in kilowatt hours and the electricity paid in the year. Master meter, yes or no. And again, if the building is only 1 meter for the entire building, or if the building have different tenants or different units have their own meter, so you select yes or no. And if the building have elevator, yes or no. Before I move to the other section really quick, this is the single button for single building. So if you click here, the single building tab will open. If you click here, the multiple building tab will open. So in this case, for this example, I click on the single one and I fill out the information for a single building. The next tab also is what I said before about like representing or illustrating your roof condition or your roof. If you are if a roof plan is available, feel free to share it here and paste it here so the person reviewing your project will see um, your building. If you have multiple buildings, feel free to share that in a separate attachment so they can have access to all of the roof of your buildings. If you don't have a roof plan like this, feel free to go to Google and take a screenshot, Google Maps or Google Earth, and take a screenshot and put your building there so they can identify any obstructions or any potential uh, locations for solar. As I mentioned too in this section, feel free to add your comments about anything particular in the building. In this case, for this example, the applicant says that the only area that they want for solar is the yellow one. So they added that in their comments like, hey, the only area that I want you to consider for solar is the yellow area. Once you complete this, the information is completed, all the blue cells are completed with my assumptions. And again, this is an example. This is not a particular building or project. The results tabs gets populated. This is how it looks like completed. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit more so you can see how it looks like. So in this case, this section is telling me that based on the information of the square footage of your roof, the system size will be able to feed a 24 kilowatt solar system, kilowatt DC solar system. And based on the building height and other considerations, the tool will let us know estimated price per watt. In this case, is $4.95 per watt. And it takes into consideration solar production, electricity savings, and the New York Sun incentive is $1.60 based on my inputs from before. So here is the estimated cost for the solar without the incentive, and then this one will be with the New York Sun incentive. So the upfront cost for this example will be $80,000. Then later on, I scroll down from what I selected in this example. I select the federal ITC, that's 30%. So you can see that I have the 30%. This is the numerical number right here. So this is the total incentives, and that gives me another reduction in my results. At the end, you're going to see that the rate of return is 5%, the payback period is 13 years, and the lifetime net savings is $48,388. And this is a cumulative cash flow that represent the 13-year payback period. In this case, as Samantha was saying at the beginning, solar will not be required for this project, but if you think that your project can consider going solar, feel free to get more information from the TA provider, because in this case, the system is higher than 4 kilowatts. Yes, check mark, because we have 24 kilowatt DC. And then the other one was if the project is less or equal than 15 years payback period. In this case, is 13. Yes. So this project, hypothetical project, can be good, or solar is recommended for this project if the project wants to pursue solar. Before I move on, I want to show really quick how the multiple buildings tab works. If you click here, this is again the project informational tab. You fill out this information, you scroll down, multiple buildings. You will not have the single building one. Here you are. So the information is the same. In this case, ownership type is nonprofit, for profit, limited partnership. You select all of that, the year, completion, so on. Incentive, if you are unsure, there are some hyperlinks that you can see if you're are part of the federal housing programs. You can check on the mapping, and there are like links here. But all that to say that if you have multiple buildings, you are going to add your building number 1, the address, building number 2, the address, and you fill out and complete the entire information per building. And then once you move out, you are going to see that instead of having the results tabs, pretend that I fill out the entire information, then the results tab will not populate like this. It will be empty. So further technical assistance will be required. So the solar technical assistance will be able to provide more information. With that, I pass it back to Samantha.
Thanks, Gio. And Leo, if you could just pop up the PowerPoint again. I recognize we're pretty short on time. So I just want to state first and foremost that we will respond to additional questions. If we don't have time today, we'll make sure that those get answered and posted in an FAQ. So do please consider to continue to pop them into the chat. Thank you, Gio, for walking us through that process. And we're really excited. Hopefully, once folks get to play through with the tool themselves, either additional questions will surface, which you can send to our email address, which we'll provide towards the end of this session, and or we'll answer through FAQs that we'll post on the website. So if the developer chooses to proceed with solar based on perhaps the hypothetical example Gio walked us through, then we would actually provide you the technical assistance provider to help walk through that process early on. So during the scope refinement process, once you've sort of finished your initial TA and you're working towards getting to a construction closing, our technical assistance provider would support your existing team. We would not replace your engineers or your development team members. Our technical assistance is just meant to be an add-on to help provide specific direction and or support to your team. So again, we are not replacing your solar engineer or your solar installer, but we're providing additional guidance here. Perhaps if the team is not as familiar both on the underwriting side or on the sort of technical design side, some of that guidance and best practices would be shared through our TA service here during the underwriting process and construction. And so in the interest of time, let's go to the next slide. And so sort of what are all of these TA services? If you do elect to pursue solar, that's when we would provide that TA for you, where the solar feasibility assessment within 2 weeks of submitting the tool and HCR as per our guidelines, excuse me. Then if you request additional technical services, we would help with that sort of build out that I was just alluding to. around specifications and help with construction and bidding. Because we recognize that if you are new to solar, this might seem like a daunting task. So we want to take away some of the scary from teams that might not be as familiar with the process of including solar in your project. I want to leave some time for some real questions. So I think that's the end of our deck, right? Yes. So as I promised, folks can jot down, if you don't already have, our general sustainability inbox. If you have additional questions that you did not post in the chat, you can feel free to submit them there. We will collect and create a sort of FAQ as we launch this program. But if folks have real-time questions in the last 6 or 7 minutes, please feel free to use the raise hand feature, or you can try and post in the chat. So I see one question, just maybe while we wait, and I don't know if Leah or someone else can just flag for me if there's a raised hand, if somebody that wants to come off mute. But I see one question, which is how do we connect with the TA? So during our typical financing process at the agency, when you submit or reach out to your underwriter or to your AVP your development director to kick off a project or get it in our pipeline, you would get scheduled a HCR TA session. During that process of reaching out is when we would then start the review process and assign a sort of solar TA in the background. So we'll connect you best based on you submitting the application to the agency. Then if you decide to pursue solar based on the last point that I was just referring to in the last 2 slides, we would then assign you after your agency project TA session. If you chose to pursue solar, we would then assign you that TA for the sort of construction and further design aspect. So we would connect after your agency TA session. And anyone else, Leah or Gio or folks, if there's other questions that are in the chat that you're able to answer or see at this point, please feel free to address those and encourage folks to use that raise hand feature if you want to come off mute.
There was one question that came up about a discount rate for the tax credits. And I want to use that to note that there is a lot of customization options with this tool. We don't usually recommend using the advanced customization because it's intended to be easy. And once you get into the custom settings, then it becomes not easy. But like that and the cash flow, when you look at the tool, you'll see that there are buttons that make it open to doing the customization if you have specifics that you want to add to the tool that you know for sure can be included into the project. So I just wanted to note that.
Thank you so much.
We had a question in the chat of how do we connect with the TA services?
I think I answered that, but they would be connected during the regular application process to the agency financing TA session. We would make that connection in line with the financial application. And then if the project chooses to pursue solar following their initial screen and the tool suggested that solar was in fact viable, then we would connect the project during that exchange with that additional TA if needed.
Samantha, another question came in. It says, is SOS required for 2025 4% applications?
Great question. Thank you, Brianna. So if you are working on an application now on the 4% side with an intended construction closing date earlier than October, you will not be required to submit the solar feasibility or the solar opportunity screening tool. If you have a construction closing that is closer to December, we encourage you and will be strongly requiring that folks submit the tool since your material likely has not been submitted to date. It will be firmly required for all projects with a construction closing in 2026 and beyond. So if you think you might close in 2025, but you end up getting pushed, we will still require you to submit the tool. So we are encouraging folks that might be closing in the last quarter to complete the tool. Again, it's not stating that you have to install solar, but you should be working towards completing that tool because we will not be giving exemptions for any project that didn't close in 2025, but then moves to 2026. So we encourage those projects who are closing in Q4 of 2025 on the 4% side to submit that with their application material. I see one question that just came in. If solar is feasible, how is it financed? There's a few options there. One, there are still available some pretty great incentives in the market through both our partners at NYSERDA through their New York Sun program, as well as the ITC tax credits that Geo and others have referenced. And so we are working both with NYSERDA and others to offer additional gap funding that hopefully we'll be able to launch, but is not secured at this time. So there might be a path where between the ITC and the New York Sun, a project could be funded, I don't know, like somewhere around almost 70% of the cost of solar, where the remaining 30% would be an out-of-pocket expense if the developer chose to pursue the solar installation. And then again, we are working on securing additional funding as the housing agency to close or fill the rest of that gap, potentially with other programs that may be launched later this year, but that is not guaranteed at this state. So I would say, given what's available in the market today, about, I don't know if anybody wants to correct me, but somewhere between like 50 and 70% of the cost is typically covered. Leah, and I think you guys have been working on some of those more specific numbers, but. And I guess I should share that if there is a small gap, programs like our Clean Energy Initiative and other dollars can help fund that between offsetting some of the costs of our traditional sort of subsidy dollars and making some space for that smaller amount of money that might be left as a unfunded through those New York Sun or ITC opportunities. Great. Well, I think we're just about at time. I want to thank everyone for their attendance, the questions, and again, if there's additional follow-up, please do feel free to send our email to our hcr.sustainability website, email, and we will continue to keep the market updated as well as post this presentation and FAQ once the material is posted, and we have some FAQs to post. So thanks everyone and have a great morning and a great weekend.